The laughter started the moment David Lee walked into his own engagement party holding Maya Carter's hand. Not polite chuckles. Not nervous giggles. Real laughter, the kind that stops conversations and turns heads. His cousin Jennifer actually had to set down her champagne glass because she was laughing so hard. His uncle Robert didn't even try to hide it. He just looked at David, then at Maya, then back at David, and said loud enough for half the room to hear, "You're serious?" Before we begin, if you love stories about power, respect, and the quiet victories that change everything, hit that subscribe button and turn on notifications. You won't want to miss what happens next. Maya's grip tightened on David's hand. He felt her nails press into his palm, felt the slight tremor in her fingers. She was smiling, but her jaw was locked. She'd told him this would happen. He promised her it wouldn't matter. He was about to learn how wrong he'd been. David came from old money. Not the kind you hear about on the news, but the kind that built Koreatown in Los Angeles from the ground up. His grandfather had arrived in 1965 with a single suitcase and a work ethic that terrified his competitors. By the time David was born, the Lee family owned 17 commercial properties, had stakes in 4 major import businesses, and commanded respect that crossed language barriers and zip codes. Maya grew up in Compton. Single mother. 3 younger brothers she helped raise. Scholarships and night shifts and a bone-deep understanding that the world wouldn't give her anything she didn't take herself. She'd met David at UCLA during a joint project between the business school and the community development program. He'd been assigned to her team. She'd been assigned to prove herself to people who'd already decided she didn't belong. They'd fallen in love somewhere between arguing about economic development models and sharing cold pizza at 2 in the morning when everyone else had gone home. It had felt inevitable. Natural. Like gravity. His family's reaction felt like gravity too, but a different kind. The kind that crushes. "This is who you're choosing." His father's voice was quiet when he finally pulled David aside, away from the party that had gone silent and awkward. They stood in his father's study, all dark wood and leather and photographs of handshake deals that had shaped a neighborhood. "After everything we've built. After everything we've planned for you. I'm choosing Maya because I love her." Love. His father said the word like it was something precious and stupid. Something children believed in. Do you know what love costs when you're responsible for more than just yourself? David didn't answer. His father hadn't expected him to. "Your brother will take over the business," his father said. "James has always been more practical anyway. You'll get your trust fund. You'll have enough to be comfortable. But you won't be part of this family's future. Not with her." The ultimatum was clean. Marry Maya, lose everything. Not just money, though that would go too. Lose his place in the family business. Lose his standing in the community. Lose the respect of everyone who'd known him since birth. David married her anyway. The wedding was small. Maya's mother cried the whole time, but not from joy, from worry. She'd raised her daughter to be strong, but strength didn't pay rent when your new husband's family cut him off without a cent. David's side of the chapel was empty except for his younger sister Sarah, who sat in the back row looking miserable and conflicted and showed up anyway. They moved into a 1-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood that was trying hard to be up and coming. David got a job at a mid-sized consulting firm. The pay was decent, but it wasn't Lee family money. Maya kept working her job at a non-profit, the one she'd been at since graduating. They were fine. Tight, but fine. What they weren't was welcome. David's calls went unreturned. Family events happened without invitations. His mother saw him once, at a grocery store, and her eyes went right through him like he was a stranger. Maya watched it happen. Watched her husband become invisible to the people who'd raised him. She never said, "I told you so," but sometimes David caught her looking at him with something that might have been guilt. Like she'd stolen something from him he could never get back. 3 years passed. Quiet. Separate. They built a life that was theirs alone, and if it was smaller than the one David had been promised, it was also real in a way nothing else had ever been. Then David's father died. Heart attack. Sudden. The kind of death that doesn't leave room for final words or reconciliation. David found out from a news alert on his phone. The funeral was announced publicly, a major event for the community. He wasn't called. Wasn't told. Just expected to know his place and stay away from it. He went anyway. Maya drove him. She didn't argue when he said he needed to go, didn't point out that showing up uninvited was asking for humiliation. She just put on her black dress and drove him across the city to the church where 300 people had gathered to mourn a man who'd built an empire and disowned his own son. They sat in the very last row. David's mother saw them. Her eyes met his for one long moment, and something moved across her face. Pain, maybe, or recognition, or just exhaustion. Then she looked away. His brother James stood at the front, receiving condolences like he was already the patriarch. He never once looked in David's direction. The service was in Korean. David understood every word. Maya sat beside him, understanding nothing but his grief, her hand steady in his. Afterward, in the fellowship hall where everyone gathered, the whispers started immediately. David heard them even when people thought he couldn't. Heard his name mixed with pity and judgment. Heard Maya's name said like a diagnosis. Like an explanation for why David Lee had thrown away everything that mattered. They were standing near the back, trying to decide whether leaving would be worse than staying, when the room's energy changed. Not loudly. Not all at once. But like a pressure shift before a storm. Conversations didn't stop, but they got quieter. More careful. People's eyes started tracking toward the entrance. A man walked in. He was older, maybe 65, dressed in a black suit that was expensive in a way that didn't announce itself. Salt and pepper hair cut precisely. He moved slowly, with the kind of ease that came from never having to hurry because everything waited for him anyway. David recognized him instantly, though they'd never been introduced. Everyone in Koreatown knew Minjun Park. Or knew of him. Knew enough to be respectful and keep their distance. Park owned restaurants and real estate and import businesses that probably imported more than anyone officially declared. He was a bridge between the old country and the new one, between legitimate business and the kind that happened in backrooms with cash and promises. The Koreans called him a community leader. The police called him a person of interest. Everyone called him sir. He walked straight through the crowd. People parted. Not obviously, not like he demanded it, but they moved. Gave him space. David's Uncle Robert, who'd laughed the hardest at that engagement party, nearly tripped over himself stepping back. Park stopped in front of David's mother. Bowed, deeply respectful. Said something in Korean too quiet for David to hear. She bowed back, both hands pressed together, and when she straightened, she was crying. Then Park turned and scanned the room. His eyes found David. He walked over. The crowd parted again. Maya's hand tightened on David's arm, not from fear exactly, but from the sudden understanding that something significant was happening and they were at the center of it. Park stopped 3 feet away. Studied David's face for a long moment. Then in Korean he said, "Your father was a good man. Stubborn, but good." David bowed, not knowing what else to do. "Thank you." "You look like him," Park continued. "Same eyes. Same stupid pride." There was no humor in his voice, but no cruelty either. Just observation. He switched to English, deliberate and precise. His eyes moved to Maya. "This is your wife." It wasn't a question, but David answered anyway. "Yes, sir. This is Maya." Park looked at her for a long time. Maya didn't look away. She met his gaze directly, her spine straight, her chin up. David had seen her face down loan officers and landlords and every kind of casual dismissal. She didn't know how to shrink herself. Something shifted in Park's expression. Not approval, exactly. More like recognition. "Your father never mentioned he had a daughter-in-law," Park said. "He didn't consider it worth mentioning," David replied. The words came out before he could stop them, harder than he'd intended. Park's eyebrow raised a fraction. "No," he said slowly. "I suppose he wouldn't have." Then he reached into his jacket pocket and pulled out a business card. Plain white, black text. A name, a number, nothing else. He held it out to David. "I have something that belonged to your father," Park said. "Something he left with me for safekeeping. Come to this address tomorrow. 2 o'clock. David took the card. His hand was shaking slightly. "What is it?" "Tomorrow," Park repeated. Then he looked at Maya again. "Bring your wife." He walked away. Didn't say goodbye, didn't wait for a response. just moved back through the crowd with that same unhurried ease. People bowed as he passed. Within 2 minutes, he was gone. The whispers erupted the moment the door closed behind him. David's Uncle Robert appeared at his elbow, suddenly friendly in a way he hadn't been in 3 years. What did Park want? I don't know, David said honestly. But he gave you his card. Robert's eyes were on the small rectangle of paper in David's hand like it was a winning lottery ticket. He asked you to meet him. Yes. Well. Robert's smile was strained. That's good. That's very good. Listen, David, I know things have been difficult, but family is family, and if there's anything. We need to go, Maya said quietly. Not rude, but final. She could feel the room's energy shifting, people starting to circle closer, everyone suddenly very interested in the son who'd been invisible 5 minutes ago. They left. In the car, Maya was quiet for a long time. Finally, she said, "Who is that man?" Someone my father did business with. Someone powerful. Dangerous powerful or just rich powerful? David looked at the card in his hand. Both, probably. And we're meeting him tomorrow. We don't have to. I can go alone. Maya looked at him like he'd said something stupid. He said, "Bring your wife." So you're bringing your wife. The address on the card led to a restaurant in the heart of Koreatown. Not one of the flashy new places, but an old establishment, the kind that had been there for 30 years and would be there for 30 more. The windows were tinted. There was no name on the door, just numbers. David and Maya arrived at exactly 2 o'clock. A man in a black suit, younger, harder looking than Park, opened the door before David could knock. He looked them over once, nodded, and stepped aside. They followed him through the empty restaurant. It was clean but closed, chairs stacked on tables, the smell of last night's kimchi still lingering in the air. The back room was different. Traditional Korean, low table, floor seating, but elegant. Expensive. Park sat at the head of the table. There were 2 place settings across from him. An older woman was serving tea, moving with practiced silence. She didn't look at either of them. "Sit," Park said. They sat. Maya folded herself down onto the cushion with more grace than David managed. The woman poured tea for each of them, then disappeared. Park waited until they'd both taken a sip. Then he slid a folder across the table. David opened it. Inside were documents. Legal papers, deeds, stock certificates. He recognized some of the properties, buildings his father had owned. The letterhead from the family business. Account numbers. The kind of paperwork that represented years of work and millions of dollars. "I don't understand," David said. "Your father," Park began, and then paused. Chose his words carefully. "Your father came to me 4 months before he died. He was making arrangements. Settling debts, securing assets. The things men do when they know their time is limited. He knew he was dying. He suspected. His doctor had found irregularities. Your father was not a man who left things to chance." Park's fingers tapped the table once. "He asked me to hold something in trust. Something he did not want to pass through the family business. Something he wanted kept separate." David's eyes went back to the documents. "These properties are yours," Park finished. "Not your brother's. Yours. Held in a trust that activates upon your father's death, managed by me until now. 3 buildings. Stock in 2 businesses. And a letter." He pulled out an envelope. Yellowed, sealed. David's name on the front in his father's handwriting. Maya hadn't said a word. She was watching Park's face, trying to read the thing that lived behind his eyes. David's hands shook as he opened the envelope. The letter inside was short, in Korean, his father's precise characters. It said, "David, if you are reading this, I am gone. And if Park has given this to you, you are still married to her. I was wrong to demand you choose. I was wrong to believe that the strength of our family came from keeping others out. I built an empire by understanding value, and I failed to see the value in what you chose. These properties are yours. They will give you a foundation. Not charity, these were always meant for you. I simply held them back because I was too proud to admit I was wrong while I still breathed. Your brother will inherit the business. It is his by right of practicality and desire. But this is yours by right of conviction. You chose love over fear. That took a courage I did not have at your age. I hope you can forgive me. I hope more than that you do not become me. The letter wasn't signed. Just ended. David couldn't breathe. The paper shook in his hands. Maya leaned over to read it, her Korean barely good enough to make out the words, but she got the shape of them. She got what they meant. I don't. David's voice cracked. Why didn't he just tell me? Park's expression didn't change. Pride is a cage men build for themselves. Your father lived in his until the end. But he was not a fool. He knew what he'd done to you. This was his apology. He could have called. Could have. Yes, Park agreed quietly. He could have done many things. He chose to do this. It is not enough. It will never be enough. But it is what he left you. Maya spoke for the first time. Her voice was steady. Why are you doing this? Holding these documents, meeting with us. You don't owe us anything. Park looked at her. Really looked, the way he had at the funeral. Your husband's father and I understood each other. We were both men who came to this country with nothing and built something that would outlast us. That kind of building requires sacrifice. Sometimes the sacrifice is your own comfort. Sometimes it is your children's happiness. We both made those choices. He paused. Poured himself more tea. But I had a daughter once, he continued. His voice didn't change, but something behind it did. Something old and hurt. She married a man I disapproved of. Not Korean. Not wealthy. Not worthy of what I had planned for her. I told her if she married him, she was no longer my daughter. The room was very quiet. She married him anyway, Park said. I did not speak to her for 8 years. 8 years. And then she died. Cancer. I found out 3 weeks after the funeral because no one thought to tell me. I was not her father anymore. I had made that choice. He looked down at his tea. I went to see her husband afterward. The man I had decided was not good enough. He was raising their 2 children alone, working 2 jobs, drowning. I offered him money help. He declined it. Said I had no right to be part of their lives after what I'd done to their mother. Park's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. He was correct, Park said. I had no right. I have many things. Much power. Much respect. But I do not have my daughter. I did not get to tell her I was wrong. That choice is permanent. He looked back at David. Your father at least tried to fix his mistake before it was too late. I am simply honoring that attempt. Consider it a professional courtesy between old men who made similar errors. David realized his face was wet. He hadn't noticed he was crying. Maya's hand found his under the table. What do I do now? David asked. You take what your father left for you, Park said simply. You build on it. You make choices he did not live to see. You prove that his faith in your conviction was not misplaced. He stood, which meant the meeting was over. The properties are good investments, Park added. Well maintained, steady tenants. They will provide income. One of them would make an excellent headquarters if you ever decided to start your own business. I mention this only as observation. David stood too. Bowed deep, formal. Thank you. Park returned the bow, shallower but respectful. Then he looked at Maya one more time. Mrs. Lee, he said. Your husband defied his entire family for you. That is not a small thing. The weight of that choice will follow both of you. Make sure it was worth what it cost. Maya met his eyes. Every day, she said. I make sure of that every day. Something that might have been approval crossed Park's face. Or maybe just recognition of someone who understood what promises meant. Good, he said. They left the restaurant with a folder of documents. Walked to their car in silence. Sat in the parking lot as the enormity of what had just happened settled over them. 3 buildings, David said finally. He left me 3 buildings. He left you an apology, Maya corrected. The buildings are just how he knew to say it. David laughed, but it came out broken. I wanted him to say it to my face. I wanted to hear him admit he was wrong. I know. It's not enough. I know that too. But it's what you got. Now you decide what to do with it. David looked at the folder. Looked at his wife. Looked at the future that had just cracked itself open in a way he'd stopped expecting. I want to build something, he said slowly. Something that's ours. Not his, not the family's. Ours. Then we build it, Maya said. They did. It took 2 years. 2 years of paperwork and planning and learning how to manage properties they'd never expected to own. David quit his consulting job. Maya stayed at her nonprofit but went part-time. They hired a property manager for 2 of the buildings and converted the third, older structure with good bones but dated interior, into a business incubator for minority-owned startups. The idea was Maya's. Your father built his empire by being given a chance, she'd said. Let's give those chances to people who look like me. They called it Carter Lee Development. Maya's name first, because David insisted. Because she'd been the one brave enough to marry him when it cost everything. The community noticed. Small articles in local papers. A feature in a business journal about innovative development models. Entrepreneurs who'd started in their incubator and grown into sustainable businesses. They weren't rich, not Lee family rich, but they were stable. Respected. Building something that mattered. David's family noticed too. His mother came to see him on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced. Maya was at the office when she arrived at their apartment, a nicer one now, 2 bedrooms, in a neighborhood that had stopped trying to be up and coming and just become it. She stood in the doorway looking small. David had never thought of his mother as small. May I come in? She asked in Korean. He stepped aside. They sat at the kitchen table. David made tea because he didn't know what else to do with his hands. She accepted the cup but didn't drink, just held it. Your father told me, she said finally. About the properties. About the trust. He told me 2 weeks before he died. David said nothing. I was angry, she continued. Angry that he had made this decision without me. That he was rewarding your disobedience. That he was undermining everything we had agreed upon. She looked down at her tea. He said to me, our son chose love over money. That is what we taught him to do. The failure is not his. Her voice cracked on the last word. I told him he was being sentimental. Foolish. He said perhaps, but he would rather be foolish than alone. He said he did not want to die knowing his son's face the way I would not speak to you at the funeral. She looked up at David. Her eyes were wet. I was there, she said. At your wedding. You did not see me. I stood in the back for only a few minutes, then I left. But I was there. I saw her looking at you. I saw how you looked at her. And I understood what your father understood. That we had raised you well enough that you recognized something more valuable than our approval. Why didn't you say anything? David's voice was barely above a whisper. Why didn't you speak to me? Because I am proud, his mother said simply. Because I am old and stubborn, and I thought that my pride mattered more than your happiness. I was wrong. Your father knew it before I did. She reached across the table. Took his hand. Hers was small and wrinkled and shaking. I would like to meet my daughter-in-law properly, she said. If she will permit it. If you will permit it. David couldn't speak. Just nodded. His mother stayed for 3 hours. Was there when Maya came home from work, walking into an apartment that felt different, charged with something that might have been healing or might have just been the beginning of it. Maya shook his mother's hand. Formal. Careful. His mother held on a moment longer than a handshake required. My son chose well, she said in careful English. I should have trusted his judgment. He did choose well, Maya agreed. The edge in her voice was subtle, but present. He chose love. Some people think that's weak. I think it's the bravest thing a person can do. His mother's expression shifted. Something that might have been respect. Yes, she said quietly. I am beginning to understand that. She didn't stay for dinner. That would have been too much, too fast. But she asked if she could come back. Asked if she could meet them again. Asked, not demanded. It was a small thing, but it meant everything. David's brother James never apologized. Never softened. He ran the family business with efficient ruthlessness and made it clear he considered David's choices a personal insult. But his sister Sarah started calling again. Started showing up at their apartment with food and stories and the kind of stubborn love that refused to acknowledge a gap of years. The empire David's father had built continued. The empire David built was smaller, but it was his own. 5 years after that meeting with Park, David and Maya stood in front of their fourth property, a space they were converting into a community center with small business resources, financial literacy classes, and youth programs. It was the kind of thing that wouldn't make them wealthy, but would make them necessary. A black car pulled up. Park stepped out. He'd aged, moved a little slower, but his presence was still the kind that made people pay attention. "Mr. Park," David said, surprised. "We didn't know you were coming." "I was in the neighborhood," Park said, which was obviously not true. "I wanted to see what you had done with your inheritance." He walked through the space slowly, examined everything, said nothing. When he finished, he turned back to them. "Your father would be proud," Park said. "This is not what he built. It is better." "Better?" David asked. "He built for security," Park explained. "For power and legacy. Important things, but also lonely things. You are building for community. For people who will remember you not because you own buildings, but because you gave them space to become something." He paused at the door. "There is a property," he said, "in East LA. Good location, struggling owner. He needs to sell quickly. I will send you the information, if you are interested." "Why?" Maya asked. She'd learned not to trust generosity that came without explanation. Park looked at her with something that might have been sadness. "Because I cannot give my daughter the chances I denied her. But I can help others receive the chances they deserve. Consider it my own form of apology." "To who?" David asked quietly. "To everyone I failed," Park said. "There are many." He left. The information arrived 2 days later. The property was perfect for what they wanted to do next. The price was fair, but not suspiciously so. Park's influence was invisible but present, smoothing the way without demanding recognition. David never knew how much of his success was his own work, and how much was the quiet assistance of a man trying to atone for a daughter he'd lost. He decided it didn't matter. Every choice was his. Every risk was his. The help just meant he could take more risks, make bolder choices. 10 years after his father's death, Carter Lee development had become a model. Written about in business schools. Studied by urban planners. Not because it made the most money, it didn't, but because it proved something people wanted desperately to believe, that you could build wealth and community at the same time. That success didn't have to mean leaving people behind. David's mother was there for everything. Awkward at first, then gradually less so. She learned Maya's name, learned her history, learned to respect the woman her son had chosen. She held her first grandchild, a daughter they named Sarah, after David's sister, and cried in a way that released something she'd been holding for too long. James attended the christening. Brought an expensive gift. Said nothing beyond pleasantries. But he came. And that, David had learned, was its own form of bridge. Park sent a gift too. A traditional Korean blessing scroll for the baby's room, carefully selected, quietly expensive. No card, no message. Just the gift and what it represented. The city changed around them. Neighborhoods gentrified, demographics shifted. The face of Los Angeles morphed into something new while echoing something old. David and Maya changed with it, adapted, stayed relevant by staying true to the thing that had started them, the belief that people deserved chances, deserved investment, deserved to be seen as valuable. On the 15-year anniversary of their wedding, David took Maya back to the small chapel where they'd married. It looked different. The neighborhood had been revitalized, the building renovated. But it was still there. "Do you regret it?" he asked her. The question he'd been too afraid to ask for years. "Knowing what it cost. What I lost. Do you regret marrying me?" Maya looked at him like he was speaking a language she didn't understand. "David," she said, "you didn't lose anything. You traded a smaller life for a larger one. You traded comfort for meaning. That's not loss. That's growth." "I lost my father." "Your father lost you," she corrected. "He chose his pride over his son, and then spent his last months trying to undo that choice. That was his loss, not yours." You just inherited the consequences and built something beautiful from them. She took his hand. I regret that you had to hurt, she said. I regret that your family made you choose. But I don't regret us. Not for a single second. Not even the hard parts. Especially not the hard parts. They stood there in front of the chapel, watching evening settle over the city they'd helped reshape in small but significant ways. Thank you, David said. For what? For being worth it. Maya smiled, the kind that carried weight and history and the full knowledge of what those words meant. You too, she said. Park died 2 years later. Heart attack, like David's father. Quick and without warning. His funeral was massive. Hundreds of people from every corner of the city he'd shaped through legitimate business and less than legitimate influence. David and Maya attended. They weren't asked to sit in the family section. Park's son was there, estranged and uncomfortable, inheriting an empire he'd never wanted to be part of. But they came. Paid respects to a man who'd changed their lives because of his own regrets. At the reception, Park's lawyer found David. Mr. Park left something for you, the lawyer said. Handed him an envelope. Inside was a deed to the restaurant where they'd first met with Park. The old traditional place with no name on the door. And a letter, in Park's precise handwriting. It said, David Lee. I am not a sentimental man, but I am practical. This restaurant has been mine for 40 years. It has been a place of business, of meeting, of decisions that shaped lives. It should continue to be that. I leave it to you not as charity, but as recognition. You have built something that honors your father's legacy while correcting his mistakes. That is rarer than you know. Use this space. Make it something that serves the community you have built. Or sell it and use the money for something larger. The choice is yours. I trust you will choose well. You have proven capable of that. I never apologize to my daughter. I live with that failure every day I continue to breathe. But I can apologize to you for doubting what you were building. For testing you with my questions. For treating your wife like she needed to prove her worth when she had already proven it by standing beside you. She is formidable. You chose well. Your father knew it. I know it. I hope you know it. This restaurant is not an apology. Nothing can apologize for wasted time and missed chances. It is simply an acknowledgement. You are building the world I wish I had built. That deserves to be supported. The letter ended there. No signature, just like David's father's letter. As if these men, powerful and proud and broken in their own ways, couldn't quite bring themselves to sign their names to their regrets. David stood in the reception hall, holding the deed to a restaurant he'd never expected to own, and understood something profound, that inheritance wasn't just about money or property. It was about the weight of choices, the echoes of mistakes, and the responsibility to do better than the people who came before. He and Maya kept the restaurant. Transformed it into a gathering space for community meetings, small business workshops, cultural events. They kept the traditional back room exactly as it was, the low table, the floor seating, the elegant simplicity. Sometimes David would sit there alone, drinking tea, thinking about the men who'd shaped his life by failing him in ways that ultimately set him free. The people who'd laughed at his wedding never apologized. Most of them didn't need to. They'd simply faded into irrelevance as David's life grew beyond their small protective circle. Some of them tried to reconnect as Carter Lee development grew more successful, more visible. David was polite but distant. He'd learned that some doors, once closed, were meant to stay that way. But he never became bitter. Never let the early rejections poison the work he was building. Maya wouldn't let him. She'd drag him back when he spiraled into anger or hurt, remind him that the best revenge wasn't rage. It was a life well lived, a community well served, a choice that proved its worth every single day. 20 years after that engagement party where laughter had cut through champagne-soaked air, David stood in front of a room full of people who'd gathered to celebrate the Carter Lee development's 20th anniversary. Entrepreneurs they'd helped launch. Families they'd housed. Young people they'd mentored. The room was packed, diverse, loud with conversation and connection. His mother was there, older now, fragile but present. His sister Sarah and her family. Even James had come, though he stood near the back, still maintaining his distance but showing up nonetheless. Maya stood beside David at the front of the room. Their daughter Sarah, now 18 and frighteningly brilliant, sat with their younger son Marcus, 14 and already showing signs of his mother's fire and his father's quiet determination. "I'm supposed to give a speech," David said into the microphone. The room quieted. He looked at his notes. Looked at Maya. Folded the notes and put them away. 20 years ago, he said, I made a choice that cost me everything I thought I needed. I married a woman my family said wasn't good enough, wasn't right. Would ruin everything I was supposed to become. He paused. Let the words settle. They were right about one thing, he continued. Maya did ruin everything I was supposed to become. She ruined the small, safe life I'd been planned for. She ruined my comfort, my certainty, my ability to accept things as they were. He looked at her. She was smiling, eyes bright. And in ruining those things, David said, she gave me the chance to build something real. Something that mattered. Something that would outlast buildings and bank accounts. He gestured to the room. This is what gets built when you choose love over fear. When you choose conviction over comfort. When you decide that the people who laugh at you don't get to define your worth. His voice was steady. Clear. The voice of someone who'd found his ground and stood on it without apology. To everyone in this room who's been told they're not enough, not right, not worthy, you are. And the people who can't see that? That's their failure, not yours. Don't shrink yourself to fit their vision. Build something so undeniable they have to revise their entire understanding of what's possible. The room erupted in applause. Not polite, event-appropriate applause, but the real kind. The kind that said we hear you, we see you, we know. Later, after the speeches and the celebration and the long beautiful exhaustion of being surrounded by community, David and Maya stood outside the event space watching people leave. Watched the life they'd built say goodbye and promised to see them tomorrow. Your father would be proud, Maya said quietly. Maybe, David allowed. But I'm not building this for him anymore. Haven't been for a long time. Who are you building it for? David thought about the question. About the daughter who'd never asked him for anything except honesty and presence. About the son who watched him navigate the world and learned what strength looked like. About the hundreds of people who'd passed through their programs and carried the echo of that chance into their own lives. For everyone who comes after, he said. So they don't have to choose. So they can have family and conviction, love and legacy, without some old guard telling them it's one or the other. Maya leaned into him. They stood there, watching the city they'd helped reshape, the community they'd helped build, the future they'd helped make possible. We did good, she said. We did, David agreed. And for the first time since that engagement party 20 years ago, he felt no doubt. No lingering what if. No ghost of the life he'd traded away. Just certainty. Pure and earned and entirely his own. The laughter that had started everything had long since faded. But what it had built, what he and Maya had built in response to it, would echo for generations. That was the thing about being underestimated, David had learned. About being dismissed, disowned, declared not good enough by people who should have known better. It gave you something to prove. And when you proved it, when you built something undeniable from the wreckage of their expectations, the victory wasn't loud. It wasn't flashy. It didn't require their admission that they'd been wrong. The victory was simply this. Waking up every morning next to the woman you chose when it cost everything, looking at the life you built together, and knowing without question that you'd choose it all again. Every sacrifice. Every hard year. Every moment of doubt and struggle and wondering if you'd made a terrible mistake. You'd choose it again. Because this, the community, the legacy, the love that had survived its testing and come out stronger, this was worth every laugh, every door closed in your face, every relationship that couldn't survive your choice to be happy. The Korean Mafia boss who'd handed him an inheritance had been right. Strength wasn't in keeping others out. It was in building something so solid that walls became unnecessary. David had built that. With Maya. In spite of everyone who'd said it was impossible. And that was the kind of victory that didn't need anyone else's acknowledgement to be real. If this story hit you somewhere deep, if you know what it's like to choose your own path when everyone says you're wrong, do me a favor. Subscribe. Share this with someone who needs to hear it, and drop a comment telling me about a time you chose love over fear. Your story matters. I want to hear it. And remember, the people who underestimate you are just giving you a chance to prove them spectacularly wrong.